Now we get a firsthand perspective from Gabe Howard. He is the host of the podcast Inside Mental Health and lives with bipolar disorder. He's an author and a speaker. Welcome, Gabe. Hey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Well, I was reading about your story, and I don't want to get in the way. Why don't you just tell us your story?
So first off, I have to tell, I'm 46 years old, and I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when I was 26. So I have to tell you 26 years in about 1 minute. So here's the rapid TikTok version. First, I was born, everybody thought I was okay. It turns out I wasn't okay. I had bipolar disorder, but nobody knew that I had bipolar disorder. So my parents, upon seeing the symptoms of bipolar disorder, they punished them. It turns out that you can't punish the symptoms of bipolar disorder out of your child. Who knew? So my parents just kept telling me over and over and over and over again, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. Here's the thing, my parents are great people. Story is not about to zag to the left. Mom is good, dad is good. Everybody loved me, right? Listen to this. In the 80s and 90s, we had dinner together as a family. It was basically Norman Rockwell. So I believed them. I thought I was bad. So I entered adulthood. I had no idea that I was sick. But here's the thing. I thought about suicide every day that I could remember. And I thought it was normal. You think there's no robust mental health education now in 2023? There was zero in 1980. Plus, I went to public school. So it was just nothing. So everybody believed that my problem was behavioral. And I got zero help. So when I became an adult, here I am. I have untreated bipolar disorder. I have all of these problems. I have all of these symptoms. And I just think I'm a bad person. So, from this vantage point, I like to say hilarity ensued. But obviously, in those moments, tragedy ensued.
And what worked? I mean, I know that your parents are not bad people. They meant well, but they didn't understand it. And back then, there's no internet, which in some ways is a good thing, right? I mean, but there's good things to the internet too. How did you get through those difficult days?
These are really difficult questions to answer because honestly, I don't know how I got through the difficult days. That bipolar disorder is always thought of in a little bit incorrectly. It's thought of highs and lows, right? You've got your godlike mania and you've got your suicidal depression. But bipolar disorder actually works on a spectrum. Those are in fact the two poles, hence the name. But you can also just end up right in the middle. So I think that there was a lot of protective factors in my life and that my parents did love me. They did care about me. They were there for me. They did check in on me. All of these things really helped avoid loneliness, isolation. They ran interference for me. But also, frankly, there's just dumb luck. Before it got too bad, I would cycle right back to the middle. The middle is the normal, the average, the stereotypical. And these provided protective factors until, of course, the symptoms reared their ugly heads again.
Where did you eventually get support from?
Oh yeah, I ended up in a psychiatric hospital. I was committed to a psychiatric hospital, and there's a long and involved story that we don't have time for. But what I want to be clear is it wasn't my mom and dad that took me. It wasn't my brother or sister, my grandmother or grandfather. It was a stranger. A stranger noticed that something was wrong with me. Not my friends, not my family, not my teachers, not my support, not my coworkers. A literal stranger. And she knew what to do, and she did it. If I had not run into her, I would likely not be sitting here today. It's literal dumb luck that I am here.
And when you were properly diagnosed, what were your thoughts then? Because you had suffered for so many years.
Listen, there's so much censorship that has to come into this, but I really thought holy blank. I'm not sure if I can swear in the National Press Club in Washington. It seems gauche. But
the media never swears.
First off, if you would have asked me an hour before I was committed to a psychiatric hospital if I had mental illness, I would have said no. Because I believed all of the things that society believed, right? People with mental illness, they come from bad families, specifically a bad mother. We just bought hard into that trope. People with mental illness are violent. They're responsible for all the violence, right? They're antisocial. They're drooling and rocking back and forth in a corner. See, that's what I thought mental illness was. So I had no reason to think that I was mentally ill. Frankly, I just thought that I was gauche. I thought I was an asshole. Because my parents, they were trying to redirect the symptoms of bipolar disorder, and they had no way to do that. It wasn't going to work. There's no lecture, there's no punishment, but that's what they thought they were dealing with. They thought they were dealing with a teenager. So when this happened and I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and I started reading the pamphlets and talking to people, I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. And in fact, when I told my mother I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, she said, what's that? I read her the pamphlet and she said, oh my God, I always called you my Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde child, which of course is a perfect analogy for bipolar disorder that shot right over her head.
And as far as kind of the takeaways of the American healthcare system, we don't have that long to go through it, but obviously, what do you think has been a good thing that's happened in recent years, and things that policymakers, like the two we just had, need to focus on?
It really does all come down to money, and it comes down to just a massive restructuring. I have a friend who loves to watch those home improvement shows, where they like, flip the house, etc. And there's always this house where, usually one a season, where they go in and everybody looks around and they're just like, okay, we're just going to tear it down. We're just going to tear it down and start over because that's how messed up this house is. Maybe we'll pull a couple parts out and save them and incorporate it into the new design, but no, we're done here. In so many ways, we have this with mental health and the safety net, et cetera. We can't even get the same statistics to pop up in the same state in different counties, right? That's what we're dealing with, right? We can't even get a state to have results that are representative across its state, and yet we're trying to figure out if this is working. The biggest thing that I always tell people is I started to be a mental health advocate 15 years ago, and we've done all of these different things. And everybody's patting themselves on the back, and we're all proud, and we've passed legislation, and all of these things are great. And I'm right there. I will go anywhere there's a microphone and food. And I'm on one hand, I'm super happy that it's being discussed, but go back 15 years and look at the suicide rate per capita, and look at it today. Where's the change? If these things are working, why is that number holding steady? It represents failure in my eyes because I'm the number. I'm the number. I need that number to lower as a protective factor for me. But everybody else like, hey, we did the thing and got the points. Okay, can we lower the number?
How can you lower the number?
Hey, listen, I love that question. And here's why I love that question. Because if I could answer it and everybody in this room is like, hey, we talked to a crazy guy at the National Press Club and he's got an idea and we did it, I would wonder what was wrong with America. I don't know.
Right.
And here's the reason that I don't know, because we're not studying it. There are not robust studies on how to do this. And it's somewhat shameful that a patient has to point that out to government agencies. Why are we not looking into this with everything that America has? And we have the finest doctors, the finest people, the most resources, and yet everybody thinks the solution is, here's what we're going to do. We're going to ask the bipolar. I appreciate the question, I do, but if we really stop and think about it, the question should be, what study can you reference that shows us what to do? And there's not a lot.
Words matter. We talked about it a little bit before we came up on stage. Detail that, of why, how we talk about this issue is important.
I think that that is such a wide-ranging question. First off, words do matter, but sometimes we take it too far. For example, I say I'm bipolar, and there's always somebody that writes me a letter whenever I give a speech and says, Gabe, you're more than just bipolar. And I always write back, nobody said just. Why did you hear just? That's very interesting. I said I was married, I said I was hungry, and you didn't say that I'm more than just married or more than just hunger. But you hear that bipolar word and everybody's like, oh, you're so much more than that. So I always like to give pause to that. Let's not let our brains fall out when we think about this. People should be able to define their own experiences. Also, nobody lies awake at night and wonders if they're having a mental health crisis. They wonder if they're going crazy. Let's be honest. We got to use the words that people use. But more to your point in the media, phrases like committed suicide. See, I live with bipolar disorder, which currently has a 15% death rate. Now, we're all friends now, I feel. If I were to die from bipolar disorder, it meant that I died by suicide. Or if we're using the language of our forefathers, I committed suicide. There is no mechanism for me to die from my disease. The disease is removed. I committed suicide. I died by suicide. I took my own life. I ended my life. Where is the he died from bipolar in this conversation? Because ultimately, that's what killed me. But that's often removed from the discussion. And it creates this parallel discussion that maybe I had some sort of choice, or maybe I had some sort of idea in it, or involvement, or I am personally responsible for it. And that's a lot. It's a lot, and it's a difficult conversation to have, and it's a nuanced conversation, because I don't want anybody who is contemplating suicide to believe that they that they can't impact it. But by the same token, if I died from bipolar disorder, I would hate to think that the conversation would be, well, he chose it, so forget it. We're just going to forget about Gabe. He's erased from history. And in fact, it's his fault and we're mad at him. That's tough. It's tough.
What kind of reaction have you got since you became a mental health advocate?
Well, nobody is more upset than my mother. No, sincerely, a long time ago, I wanted to become a mental health advocate, and I asked my parents. And honestly, I was trying to get my parents to tell me not to so that I could just blame them and just do nothing, right? That's a great out, blame mom and dad. But mom and dad they were on board with it. They're like, no, tell everybody everything, because if it can help another family, then it was worth our family going through it. So I did. And now my mother has said she didn't think I'd get this far, and she wished she would have put some guardrails on it. I feel that that's a fair point, but the reactions are all over the place. From the, oh my God, you're so brave and you're a hero, which I have to say, my ego loves. I do love it. But on an intellectual level, why am I a hero? Because I'm living my life? Because I'm fighting an illness that I have? Because I'm doing what I'm supposed to do to be well? But then let's swing that pendulum back the other way. Here's the real reality. There's only really two choices for people with serious and mental illness. We either don't have our act together, or we got our act together. Where is the phrasing for the people who are heroes, right? Aside from when we speak publicly. And then we're actually heroes for speaking publicly. We're not heroes for defeating serious and persistent mental illness. So the reactions are largely mixed.
Okay.
There are positive reactions and there are negative reactions. The most negative reaction that I get, of course, is that I'm a liar, that I'm a con man, that I'm faking this, and that this is all part of some ruse that Gabe conjured up in order to get all of you to give me all of your money. Also, that I'm in the pocket of Big Pharma, which I will take Big Pharma's money, but I seem to be in no pocket.
But you get a fair amount of that negative reaction.
I get a lot of negative reaction. And again, it's all based on misunderstanding, right? The whole you're bought and paid for by Big Pharma comes from this idea that many patients don't feel that they understand their medications. They don't feel that they're getting enough time with doctors. They don't feel that the medication is doing for them what they want it to do, and they don't understand why it's working. And they have to lash out somewhere. So that is where they lash out. And unfortunately, they start taking innocent bystanders with them. I do take medication, and that is one of the many things that allows me to live well. But of course, I do now run into this open, I just run right into this pole of, okay, well, you're a liar, and you're just trying to help the pharmaceutical companies build customers. This is tough. There is a nuanced conversation that needs to be had here that we don't have even remotely enough time for, even if we cancel everybody else and let me stay.
Well, last question, and it's the most important one. From your experience, and people who are watching this are like, well, maybe I need to talk to somebody. Maybe it's a stranger, maybe it's a family member, but to figure out how they can improve their quality of life. What would you tell them?
So if I was talking to an individual, I would tell them you've got to self-advocate. You've got to advocate for yourself, and you've got to be tenacious, and this is a difficult and long journey. Social media, number one, but also the media, movies, etc. They always portray mental illness as this way. First off, the person is acting erratically, and then somebody says, did you take your meds today? Then the person takes their meds, and then they're a great detective. Right? It's always like that. They become great at something. That's the other side, right? We're either very sick, which is problematic, we're suffering, or we're great artists, we're great detectives, we're amazing at the things that we do, all as this like backdoor gift because of mental illness. So I would tell them that that's just not true. It's going to take a long time. From the time that I left the psychiatric hospital to the time that I reached recovery took 4 years. That's a long time. But if you ask the average person from diagnosis of bipolar disorder to wellness, they'd be like, well, a few weeks, a few months, right? And then if I was talking to a larger group, just to take the moment, I really want to be clear that when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, it was the literal equivalent of my first car being a $120,000 Mercedes-Benz. Right, and I got in the $120,000 Mercedes-Benz at 16 years old, and I drove it around for a couple of months, and I thought, wow, this car sucks so badly that I myself have to advocate on behalf of all drivers everywhere to fix the automobile industry because that's how bad this car is. So you can imagine my surprise when I found out that everybody else wasn't getting $120,000 Mercedes-Benzes as their first car. And then you can imagine my surprise when I found out that some people weren't even getting cars. The best of the best of the best was offered to me, and it was woefully inadequate. So you can only imagine the rural areas, the no health insurance, the no parents, the no money, the no protective factors, the homelessness, etc., and then asking these people to dig themselves up. So I would say that anybody who is diagnosed with serious and persistent mental illness has an incredibly difficult road ahead of them, where success is largely going to be determined by how successful you were when you were diagnosed.
We have run out of time. Please thank Gabe for sharing his story today. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.